Everyone, welcome back to the Closing Room AZ. I'm your host, Jesse, with the Moreno Group here in Surprise, Arizona. Before we get started and introduce you my guest that was here a little bit ago, which we'll be talking about auto insurance, I want to do a quick shout out to our sponsor of the day, Driggs Title Agency, or Driggs Title here in Arizona. They have numerous locations. They are in Nevada as well as Arizona. They are one of the best title companies in the business. If you guys have any questions, you guys make sure you reach out to them. This company has provided over 200,000 transactions since 2004. So that tells you, and that should speak volume of what kind of company this is. So give them a call. They're a reliable escrow company that's going to help you through any of your support that you may need, whether you're a real estate agent or you're a homeowner, right? Give them a call. They're here to help you out. And the best way to reach them is to reach them through driggstitle.com, or you give them a call directly at 602-589-5300. So, yeah, just go ahead and give them a call, and they'll take care of you. All right, well, let's jump into our conversation today. This will be part 2 of our podcast. Welcome back, Carlos.
Thank you.
Love to have you. Love that you're here today, and love that you have that experience and that knowledge that you bring to the table, man. We had a good conversation on our prior podcast. We were talking about just bodily injury liability as well as property damage liability, and we spent some time there. And we could have spent a lot more time, but for the sake of time, and I wanted my listeners to get as much information as they could, we kind of cut it there. But we are going to jump in, and we're going to dive into collision and comprehensive coverage and what that means, and how it protects the drivers, the passengers in the vehicle, and as well as the vehicle, what it does for the vehicle as far as coverages. And in our last conversation, we talked about state limits. We talked about, full coverage and what that means, right? And so we'll talk about, as we talk about collision and comprehensive coverages, as well as other coverages that we're going to talk about.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about if that's applicable to the state limits, or does the state limits require to have something other than just liability, right? So we'll talk about those things, and you being the expert, we'll dive us right into it. If we got time, we'll talk about underinsured coverage, right? Which is UM and UIM as an acronym. And then we'll talk about medical pay. We'll talk about rental reimbursement. We'll talk about roadside assistance, glass coverage, and all those good stuff. But we're going to try to stay focused for our listeners so that we can give them as much information about collision and comprehensive coverage. Now, you did mention to me a little bit ago before we started that some of the coverage that applies to this that we could also dive into and talk about is probably going to be roadside assistance, glass coverage, that we could incorporate as part of the collision and comprehensive conversation.
Yeah, of course.
Right. So I don't want my listeners to get confused, and that sounded like a mouthful there. I don't want you guys to get confused with that. I've been educated here with Carlos, so it may sound like I know a little bit more than I'm led to believe here. But I'm going to try to ask Carlos a lot of questions. I did my homework before he came in, so I do have some questions for him, and I want to make sure that he addresses them as best that he can. And as always, Carlos, please make sure that whatever information you give us, that you give it to us in layman terms, right? Remember that our listeners are not insurance agents. So, as much information you give them, as simple as possible to understand and as clear as possible is going to be best for them, because I'm going to want to make sure they reach out to you. Even though we gave your number on the last podcast, we're going to give it again here before you head out, and we'll go from there. So with any further ado, Carlos, man, let's jump right into it. Let's talk about collision and comprehensive. So take us to it.
Comprehensive and collision. Before I go on there, we talked about liability, right? So you got the minimum. We talked about on the last episode. Even with full coverage, right? The comp and collision, typically people refer that to full coverage. You still have a liability portion, so just keep that in mind that you still have that. But with comp and collision, that full coverage section, it's going to be for your vehicle. So if something were to happen, let's say you're driving and you have an accident, right? And you're at fault, like it was your fault. Or if that person hits you and then they leave, you have no idea, like someone has to pay for your car, right? Like, how am I going to replace my car? How am I going to repair it? Well, your collision coverage is actually going to be able to help you either repair the vehicle for the damages or replace the vehicle in the case that it's a complete loss. For the most part, there's you're subject to a deductible. Typically, it's about $500 or $1,000, depending on what you picked. And what that'll do is it'll help you replace the vehicle or repair it. Most of the time, what happens with that is when you put a claim in for an accident or something that would happen on that part of it, the claims adjuster calls you and tries to set you up with a garaging company to be able to help you and get your car fixed. With the comprehensive part, because there's collision and comprehensive. Comprehensive is really anything other than a collision that you might have. Like you're driving, you got distracted, you hit a mailbox, or you're maybe going to Flagstaff and you hit a deer, or something happens, right? So that's the comprehensive part that you typically look at, which is dealt with the same deductible for the most part as the collision part. And of course, something happens, it'll go into the comprehensive side. For the most part, when it comes to comprehensive in collision, the benefit there is if you have a loan, typically it's a requirement for you to have full coverage, right? Or also because you don't know what coverages the other person has. And if they hit you and they leave, or they don't have insurance, well, now you're stuck with figuring out how to replace your car. And that's the reason why it's important for you to have comprehensive in collision, which is quote unquote full coverage.
Right. All right. So you mentioned loan. It's funny you brought that up because I wanted to address that really quick. In my notes, I was thinking, okay, if your car is paid for, it's still good to have collision and comprehensive coverage, right? It's good to have. But if you're financing your vehicle, if you're leasing it or financing it, most time the lender is going to require you to have it.
Yeah.
Right. It's not like you could get away with it and say, no, I just want the liability coverages, which is bodily injury and property damage. It doesn't work that way, right? The lender's going to require you, the finance lender on your vehicle is going to require you to have collision and comprehensive, right? I know we're not going to dive into uninsured, uninsured. Do they require it on those as well?
No, they don't require that.
Okay, but they do require collision and comprehensive.
Yes.
Okay. I want to read to you a little bit of what my notes say, all right?
Yeah, of course.
It says this: collision pays to repair your car from collision with another car, such as objects, potholes, rollovers, regardless of fault, like you mentioned, right? It's usually required to have, and it's usually required if you have a loan, which means, again, if you're financing your car, they're going to require, right? On a comprehensive coverage, it says covers damage other than collision, such as theft, vandalism, fire, hail, windshield cracks, right? You mentioned hitting a deer, hitting some kind of animal that's jumps in front of your vehicle, right? And again, typically that's required if you're financing your vehicle.
Yeah, that's right. And by the way, I'm happy that you did your research. So a lot of the times, because this is a short time that we speak, this is the reason why, like on the other episode, I mentioned about the importance of having a conversation with your agent where it's not a 15-minute quote, because we have to really get elaborate with explaining all these pieces of information. The things that I mentioned is typically what pops up. They hit an animal because we're out somewhere, or something happens where they hit something. Theft, I don't really, I know it happens, but it doesn't really come up too much. But again, that's the reason why it's important to have a full conversation with your insurance agent. But yes, that is correct. That's how the comprehensive and collision would work. And one of the things that pops up a lot is, hey, well, I don't have a loan anymore. I don't have to have full coverage on there, right? No more comprehensive and collision. And I think the question is misleading. I think the question you should ask yourself is not whether I should pay for that or not anymore, is whether or not, if there was an accident, if you would be put in a scenario where you would have difficulties getting to work, if you're married, or other scenarios, other responsibilities that you have. So how would having your vehicle damaged and not being able to replace it affect you? If you have the financial backing and you're like, you know what, it's not a big deal, I'll just buy another car, I'll buy it cash and I'm good to go, or I'll pay an Uber, it's good to go. But think about the scenario, I think a lot of the times with that, of what position you'll be in if something were to happen to your car, not necessarily whether or not you should pay for it. So I've always kind of go back to that as like, what would happen? And as insurance agents, we are thinking worst case scenario. We are going to exaggerate, of course, because we want to make sure that you're protected, because when you're on your day-to-day with your work-related things or responsibilities, that's probably the last thing you're thinking about, your insurance. So that's our job. That's the reason why we always emphasize about, having a conversation with us regarding that.
Gotcha. Yeah. All right. So it's key to have it. When I was thinking about the collision piece of it, which is it repairs your vehicle if you're involved in an accident, right? Having that coverage compared to the comprehensive, where it's more so some type of act of God damage to your vehicle, right? Hail, fire, or somebody comes around and vandalizes your
Yeah.
vehicle, something like that, that effect, right? The difference in those are really important. But having the right amount of coverage for those is also important, right? So again, we talked about in the prior show, we talked about the limits, right? Here, in this case, we want to make sure that we have the right amount. I did hear a story one time, and someone say, "Hey, listen, for example, if you're driving down the street and you hit a telephone pole, a city pole, man, it costs about $70,000 to $100,000 to replace, right? That's not covering your car problems. That's not covering your car repairs as well, right? And you have a brand new car, or, whatever, something fairly new, and that repair is X amount of dollars, 40, 50 grand. And I don't know what would be considered a total loss at that point, but let's say it's 30, 40,000 to repair. You got the light, you got the light post.
The liability part that pays for that. Yeah.
And then you got the repair of the vehicle, right?
For the comprehensive part, yeah.
Right. So having the right amounts is important. What do you see as an average nowadays that people are taking out on their on those coverages? Like, what do you see the limits?
Well, in comprehensive and collision, there's not so much limit on that. It's more like deductible. A lot of the times, I notice people wanting to stick to $500 deductible.
Okay.
The truth of the matter is that, like, the way we look at rates in the long term, we typically will suggest, hey, like, you can do $500 or $1,000. We want to keep your rates low, but we're looking at the long term. So if we're looking at long term, then we typically say $1,000 deductibles might be better, because you don't want to keep putting claims. We'll never tell you not to put claims. That's something that if you have to do a claim, put a claim in. We're just thinking about in the long term what's going to be the least expensive thing for you. Because if you put in a claim and it's like $800 and your deductible is $500, you have a claim on there, and now it's going to be stuck on your record for 3 years, and that will affect you with the insurance companies when the prices, when the policies renew, and the prices will go up higher. Okay. So I guess the biggest thing on that is just making sure that you know the deductible you have on there, and I guess the biggest thing becomes that we're looking to replace the vehicle, what it costs. So whether you have a loan or not, because I'm sure like you got it financed and maybe the car is worth 20 grand, but you financed it. Now you have like a $28,000 loan. We're not paying for the $8 grand. We're paying for the 20 grand. So, and when we get to that, of course, typically people who buy a car at the dealership will get like gap insurance to cover the difference for the most part.
Okay. And is that something you guys offer there at your brokerage?
We do offer that. But when it comes to that, when people get a vehicle out of there, we typically recommend get the gap insurance with the dealership, because everything's already done, a done deal. You'll get a better setup than if you go through your insurance company. So we do suggest that you go through your dealership for that.
What are some of the add-ons then at this point? When you're adding comprehensive collision to your coverage, right, to your policy here, what are some of the features, or what are some of the added features that you would say, you know what, if you're going to get these features, maybe you should also look into the following. Maybe look into some roadside assistance or look into rental reimbursement. I mean, what are some of the features that you would say, when you're educating your clients that you're talking about?
Well, the baseline part of it is, you have the full coverage, quote unquote, right? Like comprehensive and collision. So you build on that. So we build on that. What we typically recommend is having like the car rental reimbursement and the roadside assistance. And the biggest thing is if you get in an accident, while your car is getting fixed or it has to get replaced, you have a vehicle so you can move around and your life doesn't stop, right? So typically we'll have something set up for that. It's extremely important. And sometimes there's not much of a cost to that, to be honest with you. It's not a lot. And then the roadside assistance, if you get stuck somewhere in the middle of nowhere, or you have kids and they have your car with you and you're doing a job or you're somewhere else, well, how are you going to get to them? They need to call the roadside assistance to get picked up. There's a lot of things that come up. And lastly, like, your financials, like how are you doing financial? Maybe things happen, life happens. Maybe a lot of expenses popped up and you just happen to have roadside assistance to help you because you got stuck somewhere. So again, we're always trying to figure out how to protect you best. And a lot of the times, even though these coverages may seem like, it'll never happen to me, from my experience, what's happened is until it happens, unfortunately, it seems like that's when people typically like, I guess I got to have it moving forward. But until it happens, unfortunately, a lot of people don't take it. That's been my experience. I'm sure there's other people have other experiences, but just out of my 10 years of experience, it's been like, I'll add it later. Yeah. It doesn't happen, but when the accident happens or an issue happens, they're like, hey, when my policy renews, man, can you just add it back? Right. Can you add it? Because now I know what the consequences will be.
And most people don't do these things because of cost. They're thinking, well, I don't want to pay that extra $3 or $7 monthly. And I don't know what it is. I've seen. I mean, I'm talking about my own policy on my vehicles, right? And I've got newer cars. And when I look at rental reimbursement, that section for my vehicles, man, it's just a few dollars. We're talking about $3, $3 and change or $4 and change for one car monthly to have.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking to myself, if something was to happen to me, at least I could pick up another vehicle. And I know there's some limits as well with rental reimbursement. It says, look, you get a vehicle, we pay up to this dollar amount monthly or daily up to you until you reach your daily or your cap.
Your limit for the day.
Your limit, right, for the day. But there's different dollar amounts. So depending on what you want to drive, right? You want to drive, the Sentra, or do you want to drive the I don't know,
something similar to what you have
the
most of the
SUV,
time,
right? Something a little more expensive, I guess, right? So that's why it's key. All right, and again, it happened to us. It's happening to us again, Carlos. Our first podcast, we talked about the liability coverages for bodily injury and property damage, and now we're talking about comp and collision, and we're running out of time again. So you know what? We're going to jump into part 3 here shortly, and we'll do it again, and we'll probably end up wrapping up because we're still missing uninsured, underinsured, and what that means.
Medical insurance,
and medical, right? And I still want to talk a little bit about rental reimbursement. I want to talk about accident forgiveness, and I want to talk about glass replacement. And we haven't hit those areas yet.
Yeah.
Right? So there's a lot of information. So stick around. Listeners, stick around, listen up, because there's a lot of information. And we're just getting started on the tip of the iceberg here about insurance, because, Carlos, I know you got information about home insurance. Yeah. We got information about personal lines, umbrella coverage, and what that does. And, of course, commercial insurance for our business owners.
Of course.
So we got a lot of information. Carlos, drop us your number again. If we got to contact you, what's that number we could reach out to you?
Yeah, you can call me or text me at 623-250-6308. We can set up an appointment and we can review your proposal that you have right now, or well, not your proposal, but your policy that you have right now.
Okay.
Or we can, just have a conversation about just general questions you might have. All
right, awesome. And if you speak Spanish, or you have a family member, friends, something like that nature that are Spanish speaking, or prefer to speak to someone that speaks Spanish, Carlos, you're fluent?
Yes, I am fluent.
Yeah. All right, awesome. So reach out to Carlos Fregoso here, and he will take care of your needs. Till then, we'll see you guys back on our part 3 of our podcast, continuing auto insurance coverage. Wishing you guys a beautiful day, fantastic day. And as always, set no limits.